Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the commissioners for a very interesting hearing. Chairwoman Rosenworcel, you said some things that I thought were really spot on in your testimony. You said that broadband isn't nice to have, it's need to have. You also said you don't have a fair shot in the 21st century unless you have broadband at home, which I completely agree with. And that's why I think it's so important that you've created the broadband availability map to really highlight the need to extend infrastructure in parts of the country that don't have it. In perusing that map, I couldn't help but noticing that there's a huge hole in coverage right over my district, both in fixed and in mobile broadband. And I know that a lot of our conversation at the hearing today has centered around affordability of broadband. But my point would be, it doesn't matter how affordable broadband is if you don't have access to it, and many of my constituents don't. My constituents have kind of a unique problem in that so much of my district is in public ownership, either National Forest or Bureau of Land Management land. Many of my communities are completely landlocked. I've got one city that's completely surrounded by BLM. I've got another city that's completely surrounded by National Forest. And problems arise when we try to permit the extension of broadband infrastructure through public lands. And Commissioner Carr, I know that you, in answering Congressman Joyce's question on this, you got into this a little bit. So we're supposed to have a shot clock of 270 days on the permitting of broadband infrastructure through federal land. But our agencies right now commonly ignore that shot clock. So the question, and I'll start with you, Commissioner Carr, the question is, what can be done about that?
It's a challenge. We've tackled this. You've tackled this through legislation multiple times, Congress has, and we have a shot clock right now on these entities, and it's not being abided by. I think it kind of has to go maybe to the top of these agencies and really bring it to the leadership's attention that Congress is serious about these deadlines, imposing some consequences for missing the deadlines, because right now there isn't one.
I mean, consequences like what?
You know, it could be sort of consequences for funding, perhaps, something that would be enough to get the attention of leadership, because these are, you know, they're good-meaning public servants, but their missions are directed on totally other issues, and their career isn't advanced by moving quickly on broadband permitting. So we have to find some way of aligning the incentives, whether it's carrots or sticks, as my colleague says, to make sure that they're abiding by those shot clocks.
I completely agree. I've introduced a bill, H.R. 3340, the Granted Act, that would simply say, if you have a permit that has met all of the other requirements, but the shot clock has expired through the inaction of a federal agency for the permitting of infrastructure across public land, then the approval is deemed granted. Yeah. And I think that that would incentivize federal agencies to not ignore the shot clock. And I know it's a heavy-handed approach, but I don't know how else to get their attention. Maybe we'll look at also tying it to maybe some funding, but you know, something needs to be done. I completely agree with you. Chairwoman Rosenworcel, which in your defense is no worse than Obernolte, one of the things that has really changed about the way that consumers get information, particularly video services over the last few years, is the advent of streaming services. And I know you're very aware of how the industry has transitioned there. So questions have arisen recently about whether or not the FCC has the jurisdiction to regulate these new online video marketplace distributors as in the same manner that you have regulated them in non-streaming formats in the past. So do you believe that the FCC has that jurisdiction, and do you intend to regulate streaming services the same way that you do other MVPDs?
I think the answer is that our authority extends only to what Congress provided us in the 1984 Cable Act and the 1992 Cable Act. And I think it's fair to assume that none of us in this room were contemplating the kind of streaming services we have today when Congress passed those laws.
Right, thank you. That's a pretty clear answer. Well, I know we have some people waiting to go on, and we have votes. So I want to thank you all for your dedication to extending broadband into rural districts like mine. It's very much appreciated. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman